What's up guys, Levi here, and in this video I'm going to talk about the Scream franchise and rank their films from worst to best. Now I've been a fan of Scream for a very long time, you're talking late 2000s to early 2010s, sort of around the time maybe just before Scream 4 came out. I think that Ghostface is one of the most iconic horror film characters of all time. Definitely up there with the likes of Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, even if Ghostface is always mortal in comparison to those two. But yeah, we'll get right into it. So coming in at number 7 is, to probably not a lot of people's surprise, Scream 7. Now, I'm not that sort of person that wants to criticize films like this because I'm a big fan of this series. I want this series to succeed. But when you market a film to appease all these horror fans, all these Scream fans, you're bringing Sidney back, you're bringing Stu Macher back, only to not live up to the hype that it was creating in the first place, it kind of is a letdown. Now, I remember watching like the first trailer for it thinking, you know what, this film actually could be really good. And then I saw the second trailer for it and I was like, oh, okay. I guess they really are leaning into this AI sort of thing then. And then in the days leading up to its release, I found myself just feeling like less hyped about it. I felt like, the closer it got, I was just a little like, I'm not sure this film's actually going to be that good. And it came out, I've watched it, and yeah, it's not good. Sidney's return after being absent from Scream 6, it was definitely something to be excited for. But with what she was given, I just don't feel like it was worthy of a return from her to the franchise. Because the more and more Scream films come out and the more that Sidney's being targeted, people are just kind of like, how many times can one person just go through the same shit over and over again? If you're going to bring her back, you need to have a story that's kind of worth bringing her back. Okay, they might have tried to justify it with she's got a family now, she's got kids to think about. I just don't think it stuck the landing really in this film. Now, the opening act, I will give that credit because I like that they brought back the Stu Macher house. I like that essentially it was a super fan that ended up getting, killed first. I just think that sequence as a whole was a pretty good one. Especially since it didn't really have like any connection to the rest of the film. I think that sometimes sequences like that can work. And I definitely feel like it worked there because when I watched it for the first time, I was like, holy shit, this is actually really good. Them burning down the Macher house at the end of it, though, I was just a little bit like, okay. I mean, we saw this in the teasers and in the trailers and whatnot, but, at this point, my hype for this film had died down at this point, and I was just kind of like, okay, so they've burned down the Macher house. Where are we going from here? I liked Sidney's daughter, Tatum. I think she was a good character. I like that she very much wanted to be like her mother in the sense that she wanted to be a fighter. She wanted to learn to defend herself. There was even that scene where she'd gotten out Sidney's jacket from, I believe, Scream 2, which Sidney wasn't a massive fan of, Tatum wearing something like that. But overall, I feel like I feel like Tatum's progression from the film, that was something good. She came from being this person that wanted to fight to then ended up having to actually live through this sort of situation that her mother's been through many times in the past. At the end, it did get a little bit cheesy because there was this whole thing, like I'm Sidney Prescott's fucking daughter, that was a little bit cheesy for me, but as a whole, I feel like her character development throughout the film was something to remember. Stu Macher. So, this was the main reason a lot of people wanted to go see this film because it was the return of Stu. This is something that fans have been clamoring for years now, ever since people found out that Scream 3 was supposed to be essentially Stu Macher pulling all the strings. So we found out that he was casted. Now, when I found out that he was casted, along with Scott Foley and David Arquette, I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, well, it's probably just going to be like a nightmare sequence or something like that. Then seeing him appear in the film, it was like, okay, are they actually going to bring him back? Now, whilst I was thinking that, it was also a case of, I know that they're going to be using AI in this film, so I was very wary of that. Now, you've got people that are saying that Stu's first appearance in the film, that wasn't actually AI, but the other ones were. And you've got people that are saying Stu's dead, it was all AI. I feel like, as somebody as well who wants Stu to come back to the franchise, to sort of reveal himself as the one that's been pulling all the strings all along, I mean, you've got 7 films now to make sense of it, but for some reason the writers and the studios just seem dead set on not bringing him back. But after realizing that this whole thing, it was all AI and everything, it just left a lot to be desired. It felt like a lot of fans that wanted this to happen were just blueballed. Now, there was test screenings. I've heard of them. First of all, how the fuck did this film make it past test screenings? Second of all, there was, I think this was confirmed by Kevin Williamson himself, where there was a test screening where they had a scene at the very end with Stu, but it was cut because the people in the test screening didn't like it. Which leads me to ask the question, who the fuck did they have in these test screenings? Like, that being said, seeing Stu back for the first time since the original film, it was satisfying. He really, Matthew Lillard, he did put his all into that role, even if it was just a couple of recordings, but still. Just seeing Stu just being the same old person that many years later towards Sydney, who had also grown up, it was something that was it was good to see, and it was satisfying for a fan of the characters. So this whole AI thing. Now, I know that Scream is something that is supposed to be meta and very aware of itself, but I feel like when you introduce AI into something, it kind of decreases the value of the entire thing in general. So, obviously, Stu was all AI, and then you had Tatum's boyfriend, I think, trying to prove that it was all AI. And then you then have Dewey and Roman show up at the end of the film as part of AI. And then it turns out one of the killers used to work for Google, so he had all this knowledge and access to AI related things. It just felt very much like AI was sort of used as a scapegoat as to why Stu wasn't actually in this film, and I'll get to the ending in a minute, but yeah. I just felt like it was a bit of a cop out to use AI. I felt like it was a bit cheap. But yeah, we also had the return of the Meeks characters, which I like them. I thought they were the better parts of the 5th and 6th films. They definitely lived up to Randy's character for me. And I think the actors that play them both, they're very good actors. They've had some memorable scenes in the franchise as well, so it was nice to see them back for this one. And I think it kind of works that they're kind of working as like understudies for Gale as well. Speaking of which, Gale coming back, I think the scene that she returned in, it was cool because you have Ghostface chasing, and then all of a sudden he's just ran over by this car, and then Gale gets out, and it turns out it was her that did it. I thought that was pretty cool. But other than that, I just don't really feel like she had much to do in this film, which is kind of an issue because she didn't really do much in Scream 6 either. And she was somewhat integral to the third act in Scream 5, but it just doesn't feel like they're doing all that much with Gale, which it is kind of disappointing, but at the same time, I get it. They want to focus on like newer characters, like in 5 and 6, they wanted to focus on the newer cast. In this one, they wanted to keep it more grounded and focused on Sydney and Tatum. One of my favorite sequences from this film was the bar sequence. So you got Tatum and then the neighbor and the Meeks in there, and then a couple of other characters. Thought that sequence was really good. I thought some of the kills in it were really interesting. Seeing Chad get stabbed again, it's just like, how many times, man? But yeah, I think Lucas's death scene. That was probably one of the most memorable kills in quite some time. Because you have him essentially spiked on one of those beer taps, and then as he drops down, the beer starts pouring out of his mouth. I felt like that was quite a creative kill. Something very akin to something that maybe Terrifier might do, for example. But also, at the same time, I can see why people might have thought that was a bit of a funny kill, but I thought that was pretty cool, to be fair. Now, this film, for me, it was very much an up and down film. But it was the third act where it just went completely off a cliff. So, you have your beginning bit, which was pretty good, and then you have the introduction of AI, which where things went down a bit. Then you have like the chase sequences between, Sydney and Tatum, which, went back up, and then they were proving that it was basically AI, which then went put the film back down a little bit, and then the reveal, it just went completely off a fucking cliff for me. Whilst before I talk about the ending, I just want to mention Joel McHale as Mark. I know a lot of people want Patrick Dempsey to come back as Mark Kincaid, but I feel like what Joel McHale did was really good. I felt like he was one of the more memorable characters of this film as well. The fact that he was very much one of those people that wanted to fight, that was going to do anything to defend his family. For me, he was a bit of an MVP of the film. But yeah, we'll go. So going to the ending. It's revealed that Jessica is one of the ghost faces, and then it was that other guy from the psychiatric ward, which completely deflated me of seeing that. And then seeing hearing the motive as well. Like, she loved the book Out of Darkness, and then she idolized Sydney, idolized her enough that she was going to kill her own husband that was abusing her, and she killed her son because she saw a lot of her husband in him. And then saying that, she basically did all this because when Sydney didn't show up to New York, it let her down. It just, what the fuck? I don't know what's happened to this franchise, but I feel like the reveals are very hit and miss ever since the first one. I think that the second film did a good reveal. Third one was a bit meh. Fourth one was probably one of the more memorable ones of the franchise. And then the fifth one as well. People could see it coming, but I still feel like the way they did it was really good. And then 6 was kind of one of those reveals that also deflated me a little bit. And then you've got 7, which was just a horrible reveal. But I will say that this reveal was definitely the weakest of the franchise. It just felt like they spent so much time trying to make a decent film that when it came to the whole reveal, they just thought, shit, we're kind of out of time here. We'll just quickly rush something down. The other reason that the reveal kind of deflated me is because I think, along with a lot of people, we wanted Stu to be the one that was revealed to be, the ultimate ghost face. But then you have this final act where Sydney and Tatum basically fighting Jessica. They got rid of the psychiatric guy pretty quick. And just that final kill as well, where they just both shoot Jessica in the face so much that her face is just not recognizable at that point. Again, it's a pretty cool kill, but even I was just a bit like, what the fuck was that? Yeah, I don't know where this film's going to go. Sorry, I don't know where the franchise is going to go from this film. Like, there's talks of a Scream being set in Vegas. There's talks of a Scream being set in London. I think Sydney, Neve Campbell is coming back for it, along with Tatum. Again, if you're going to bring them back, all I'm going to say is just write a story worthy enough to have them back. Otherwise, you could literally do this film with anybody else. You could do the film with the Meeks as the main characters, and it probably wouldn't have that much difference if you were going to do it with Neve Campbell nowadays. But yeah, overall, Scream 7, definitely the worst of the franchise. Coming in at number 6, and this is going to be a bit of a hot take, this is Scream 5. So when Scream 5 was announced and the trailers and everything came out, I was so excited because this is the first Scream film we've had in years. So I really wanted this film to succeed. And I remember watching it for the first time. And overall, I just feel like it kind of failed to live up to the hype. Now, I will give the writers and the directors credit for having a different kind of opening. Instead of having somebody killed, they basically had Jenna Ortega's character injured. Because from a storyline sense, they just wanted to draw Sam Carpenter back into Woodsboro. Now, the first 30 to 45 minutes were really good. I thought some of the kills in it were really good. I liked the core 4, which I know wasn't coined until part 6, but I did like the core four characters of that film. Yeah, I thought Jack Quaid's character was a really good character as well. And obviously seeing the core trio for the first time in such a long time as well, again, was definitely good. It's a shame that we didn't get like one last scene with the three of them together. Kind of like, Star Wars, where we never got a scene between Han, Luke, and Leia, but I liked Dewey's character. I liked that, not so much that he wasn't with Gale anymore, because it's this franchise just seems to be built around this whole will they, won't they between Dewey and Gale. But I liked where Dewey was. I liked that he was a little bit rough around the edges. He was kind of like miserable. And at the same time, I liked that he was kind of like a mentor to Sam. But then we had the scene in the hospital where Dewey ended up finally being killed off permanently, which I do have some problems with that scene. And the fact that Dewey went out because after all of his knowledge and after all of his experience, he gets distracted by a phone call when he's about to kill Ghostface. That's very out of character for him. Like, somebody that's been through as much as he has, he knows phone calls don't matter at this point. Ending this Ghostface is what matters. And I just feel like overall they killed off Dewey for, shock value and to up the stakes, whereas it kind of deflated me and ruined the rest of the film for me as well. The return of Billy Loomis, I did like that. I liked the connection between Sam Carpenter and Billy Loomis being like her father. I thought that was really interesting, and that's something I will give the film credit for, is like, is Sam gonna end up becoming what her father was? Again, this was something that was visited in Scream 6 as well. I did like Billy Loomis's involvement in the film. I thought that was really cool. Now, Sydney's appearance, to say that Sydney has been like the final girl of this franchise up until this point, I don't feel like she really had that much to do in this film. Up until like Act 3, where she comes back because Dewey's gone and she's going back to the Maca house because that's where Sam and Tara are, and she's trying to get them out before they end up, in a lot of shit, essentially. Now, the final act I did think was pretty decent, even though a lot of us knew that Amber was definitely one of the ghost faces. When she turns around and just shoots one of her friends and says, "Welcome to Act 3," I thought that was a really cool moment. And then it felt very much like the original one, but they kind of modernized it a little bit. I don't know if it's just because it took place in the Maca house, just like the original one did, but I did like the motives, even if they were like batshit, being that the Stab franchise had become that bad that they wanted to essentially create like the next film with what they were doing. You've got Sydney and Gale versus Amber, which was satisfying, I guess. I thought that Amber being set on fire, that was pretty cool, and then Sam versus Richie, that was really good. And it was a nice little tease as well to see Sam sort of live up to her father's legacy in the way that she ended up killing Richie. With what happened to Chad in the film, the fact that he was alive in the end, and then with what happens to him in the next film, you got to wonder to yourself, like, is he really being set up as the next Dewey? Because he just seems to be somebody that can literally get stabbed so many times and somehow manage to essentially walk it off, basically. But yeah, overall, I did like Scream 5 partially, but I feel like them killing off Dewey, it really killed off the film for me. And, there were other parts as well to the film that weren't so great as well. Yeah, we'll move on to the next one. So coming in at number 5 is Scream 3. So Scream 3 is definitely the weakest of the original trilogy of films. I felt like that with it taking place in Hollywood and it taking place on a movie set, I think it kind of pushed the meta a little bit too far. The opening sequence where they kill off Cotton Weary, that was pretty cool. It was cool that they kind of used this voice changer to mimic other people's voices, just to like really bait him in. So I thought that was cool. And you've obviously got Sydney in hiding because of what she's been through in the first 2 films. Does make sense. I think that Sydney's nightmares as well about her mother, they were quite chilling. Like the The one where like Sydney's windows open and you just see this ghostly woman come up to the window, like that scene for me was like so chilling. Like, and especially like when I watched this for the first time, I was like pretty young. Like that was fucking scary. And then you had the bit that took place in like the house on set, where you had like this sheet over somebody that was covered in blood, and you just heard Sydney's mother say, you know, "Give mommy a kiss." Again, pretty chilling. Again, we have this whole Gail and Dewey's will they, won't they sort of shit. You know, like after the second film, you know, having to see it all over again, you know, it can become kind of boring. Don't get me wrong, I loved Gail, I loved Dewey, but the whole will they, won't they, there's only so far that you can take it before it kind of becomes a little bit stale. Mark Kincaid, I thought was a good character. I feel like him just being stuck in this one film, I feel like works for his character really well. I know a lot of people wanted him back for 7, but with what we got from Joel McHale's Mark in part 7, I feel like Mark Kincaid overall being just kind of central to Scream 3, I feel like is very satisfying. Scott Foley, I feel he did really well. He just seemed very much like a director that was kind of having the ground shrink beneath his feet, and having him revealed at the end as Ghostface, it was a little bit meh. And to hear that, you know, he was the one that was pulling up all the strings all along, again, was a little bit meh. But then we have the ending sequence where it was kind of batshit, because he just jumps up and just starts screaming, and Dewey's just shooting at him, and Gail and Sydney are saying, "Shoot him in the head," and then he gets shot in the head. Probably one of the more funnier endings to a Ghostface. But yeah, overall, I'd rank Scream 3 at number 5. I feel like it was just a little bit better than parts 5 and 7. But then moving on to number 4, we have Scream 6. Probably a little bit of a hot take that I've ranked this above 3 and 5, but for me, I remember going to see Scream 6 in the cinema, and I had a lot of fun with it. I like that they were continuing on with the Carpenter's storyline. Obviously, you got Tara going to NYU, I think it is, along with the Meeks as well. When I was watching this for the first time, I remember watching in the opening kill. Very, very run of the mill sort of thing, except that this was going to be a little bit more risky and a little bit more in public because of where they were. And Samara Weaving's character, who I do like Samara Weaving from Ready or Not, I think she knocked it out of the park with that film. But after her character met her end, you then have Ghostface unmasked, and I was sat there thinking, whoa, they've never done this before. This is actually really cool. And then it's kind of like a journey into his life a little bit. You know, he goes back to his apartment where his roommate that they were planning all this stuff with lives. And then there was quite a lot of tension because his roommate wasn't there, but he was getting a phone call from who he thought was his roommate, but was actually Ghostface. And then when Ghostface basically gets him down, and he was saying, you know, I just wanted to continue on this movie. And then Ghostface says, who gives a fuck about movies? I thought that was pretty cool. And you have the apartment sequence. So you've got Tara's roommate, Quinn, who looks to have been killed, and then there's this whole chase sequence between Ghostface and the Core 4. You've got Danny, who Sam's in a relationship with, trying to warn him as well. I thought that scene was done really well, and then seeing Mindy's girlfriend Anika basically get stabbed to the point where she was never going to make it, and then having her crawl across this ladder to get into Danny's apartment, to then have Ghostface come in and basically shake the ladder and knock her off, and then she falls and ends up smacking her head against this dumpster. Again, it was a very effective kill. It was quite creative because it's not the sort of kill you'd expect to take place in a Scream film, but it worked. When you cut to the next day and then Detective Bailey comes out of the apartment building and says, I've lost both my kids now, I was sat there thinking, who's this other kid he's lost? Which kind of spoiled for me that he was definitely going to be one of the ghost faces. Then you have Gail's entrance to the film, and I like the fact that Sam was about to hit her, but she dodged it, so then Tara just swung in instead for her. That was pretty cool. I felt like that Gail going back to writing books kind of devalued what had been built with her with Scream 5, because she said that she wasn't going to write anything about what happened with Dewey or anything like that. But when she said that Sydney's safe, she's taken Mark and the kids, or taken her husband and the kids, I was sort of thinking to myself, oh yeah, Sydney's not in this film, which kind of says to me how enjoyable this film is when I completely forgotten that Sydney wasn't going to be in this. Then we go to the shrine, which I think was really cool. I thought it was cool seeing all this Ghostface memorabilia from the past. Seeing stuff from Scream 1, 2, 3, 4, seeing the TV that, killed Stu Macker, and, Kirby's introduction to the film, I like that as well. Kirby was definitely one of the more memorable characters from those earlier Scream films, so it was nice to see her back. Hopefully she'll be back in another one. But I liked the little nerd off that Kirby and Mindy were having with each other about horror-related stuff, and one of them saying, Stu Macker's dead, and the other one saying, is he though? Then we have the subway sequence. So I love this sequence. I thought this sequence was so cool. The fact that you've got so many people dressed up because it's like Halloween, and you just see all these characters from other IP, which I thought was cool. And then you have like a couple of ghost faces within that group of people as well. And then you have Ethan sort of with Mindy. Mindy doesn't trust him, so he just goes and sits elsewhere. And then this ghost face shows up. And every time they go into a tunnel and everything gets dark, and you see this ghost face get closer every time, it lights up. I thought that was a good use of a subway sequence. I thought the tension in that was really good. And then you eventually see Mindy get stabbed by Ghostface, and Ethan comes in looking like the hero, like he had nothing to do with it at all. And then in the shrine where you had Tara, Sam, and Chad, along with, I think Kirby was there as well. Yeah, Kirby was there as well. But you have Tara and Chad kind of admit their feelings towards one another, and then Chad gets attacked and just stabbed a lot by two ghost faces. Now, when they had two ghost faces just show up at the same time, I thought to myself, are they actually going to do the cult ghost face thing now? Because, again, it's been teased throughout the film with the shrine and everything, and with the conversation between Mindy and Kirby, is Stu alive? Turned out it wasn't, and I felt that was kind of fans being blue-balled a little bit. As much as I love this film, where it goes downhill for me is the reveal. I think that the Bailey family, which is actually the Kirsch family, it was very much a letdown. I think a lot of people knew that Ethan was going to be a Ghostface. I knew that Detective Bailey was going to be Ghostface because of what he said earlier in the film. And I guess Quinn coming back was a bit of an interesting one because it was made to look like she had died. But that being said, I did like the chase sequence between those three and the Carpenter sisters. You have Kirby getting injured again. So she was stabbed in the same place that she got stabbed in Scream 4. And then you have Sam kill off Quinn permanently. And as she drops, you just see Detective Bailey behind the both of them, and they both running each other. I did like Tara's kill to Ethan. I thought that was really cool. It very much culminated as well in the whole Sam and Tara storyline, about Sam needing to let Tara go, and she didn't. Ends up stabbing Ethan like directly in the mouth. I thought that was so cool. And then you have the ending, which, to say that Melissa Barrera is not going to be in any more of the films, I feel like the ending's really satisfying. She drops Ghostface mask, she's ready to leave this all behind, and overall she does end up leaving it behind. But yeah, overall, Scream 6, definitely one of the better films of the franchise. It's just the ending of it, well, the reveal of it kind of ruined it. Coming in at number 3, we have Scream 4. So I thought this was a cool sort of legacy sequel before legacy sequels became popular. You've got Sydney grown up later on in life, trying to move on from the events of the first three films, writing a book called Out of Darkness, which kind of documented like her struggles and what she was going through at the time. There was obviously the focus on a younger cast, so you've got Sydney's niece Jill and all of her friends Kirby and whatnot, which I thought was a bit of a cool dynamic. You know, it meant that the original trio, Sydney, Gale, and Dewey, they didn't have to do too much. It didn't have to be a film that was just completely centered around them. Having Sydney's niece in danger kind of upped the stakes a little bit. Some of the kills in this film were really cool. I think the most memorable one for me was the one where Anthony Anderson basically gets stabbed in the brain, and he gets out of the car and he's just swinging like, "Where are you?" It was funny, but it was also one of the more cool and creative kills. You've got the bit where Dewey was holding a press conference and Alison Brie's character ended up getting thrown off the roof of the hospital. Overall, the kills in Scream 4 were pretty good. Kirby, her introduction to the franchise, definitely one of the more memorable characters of the franchise. Like I said, I hope she's in future films to come because I really do like a character. I liked the whole how nerdy she was about horror films. Now, the reveal to me was the second best reveal in the franchise behind obviously the first film. I don't think any film could top the reveal from the first film. So you have Charlie, who, as a nod to the first film, was tied to a chair and Kirby had to answer these questions about horror films, which he ends up succeeding and saves him ultimately, but then the twist is he ends up stabbing her and is essentially revealed to be one of the ghost faces, with his motive being that, you know, he wanted Kirby for a long time and it only took till now for her to be interested. And then you have Sydney get stabbed by Ghostface, and then Ghostface takes the mask off. And it's Jill, her niece, which, again, is a real shocking reveal. And then when you hear her motives about wanting to be famous, wanting to be who Sydney was, I feel like it's a really good motive. And the line about her saying, you know, like, I don't need friends, I need fans, is quite an intricate motive, but also a memorable one as well. And then after Sydney's taken out for the time being, that scene where Jill was essentially doing what Jim Carrey was doing in Liar Liar, where she was just beating herself up and just throwing herself against walls, tables. I thought that was really creative. It really made it look like she was going to get away with it. Up until you get to the hospital, and then she lets slip the, you know, about Gale and her having matching scars, even though she shouldn't have known. But yeah, you have that final sequence take place in the hospital, and as Jill's about to kill Gale, she's like, "Do you have any last words?" And she says, "Yeah, just one, clear." And then Jill's like, "Clear?" And then City just pops up behind her with the defibrillator and just says, "Clear," and then just zaps Jill's head. And then that would be the last film that we got for quite a while until Scream 5. It was the last film that was made with Wes Craven, who unfortunately passed away since then. But overall, I really did like this film. I remember going to see this in the cinema. Yeah, I did for the most part prefer Scream 6, but the only reason that this one edges it out is because of the reveal in this one and just how cool it was in comparison to Scream 6, which was just kind of bad. But coming in at number 2, you've got Scream 2. I thought that Scream 2 was a well-done sequel. I thought the acting in it was good. I thought the characters in it were good. The opening sequence of this film as well, I quite like that one. Because it was one of those ones that didn't really have any connection to the rest of the film. It was just like a random Ghostface killing, which I thought was pretty cool. You've got this new setting as well where Sydney's now in college, along with Randy, and then you've got Dewey and Gale sort of well, you got Dewey sort of like looking out for Sydney, and then you've got Gale who's there just for the story. I like the addition of Cotton Weary as well, being the one that was alleged to have killed Sydney's mother, and him essentially just trying to get a conversation with Sydney just to try to explain himself, just to try to clear his name essentially. I did like that dynamic within the film. The thing that really stood out for me in this film was the whole sequel talk. So there was sat in the classroom, and you have Mickey and Randy and a couple of other people talking about sequels, about how sequels never really outdo the originals, and then they were trying to think of sequels that did, and I thought that was really cool. I thought that that was a good use of meta in terms of these films. The kills in this film were quite memorable as well. So you've got the cops that were killed when they ended up crashing into that building area where the one of the pipes ended up going through the window and basically mashed one of their faces in. Derek, played by Jerry O'Connell, he definitely went out like a bit of a boss essentially. You know, he was goading them into killing him essentially, but he was doing it just to protect Sydney. I feel like Derek was definitely one of Sydney's better boyfriends in the franchise. You've got Randy Meeks as well, which when I watched this film for the first time, I was so disappointed that Randy ended up getting killed. I get it, it was to sort of bring shock value and to have, you know, the stakes up a little bit, because Randy's that character that you want in these films. He's the one that's knowledgeable about all these scenarios and what to do and what not to do. So taking him out kind of ups the stakes a little bit, because he's not there to give guidance to Sydney and to Dewey and to Gale about how to survive a sequel, essentially. And then you've got the first kill that takes place in the cinema. That was pretty memorable. And then you've got CC's as well, who, you know, was played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. I thought that that sequence was quite memorable as well. But then you do have another great twist at the end. It's not one that lives up to what Scream 1 did, and it's definitely not as good as the one in Scream 4. But yeah, so you have Debbie Salt, who was in this film like sporadically, talking with Gale and whatnot, and then when she's revealed at the end, like Gale knows who she is, but then Sydney says Mrs. Loomis, and it's like, oh shit, she's Billy Loomis's mum. So that was a pretty cool reveal, and again, Mickey, you just kind of knew that he was going to be one of them, and the fact that he was going to blame him doing it on the films, and that there was going to be like this big trial, and it was going to get him all this attention. Yeah, as always, you know, you've got a bit of a chase going on, and then you've got Cotton Weary, which you're thinking to yourself, is he going to turn against Sydney? Is he going to help Sydney? And ultimately, he does help Sydney, because Sydney now understands that Cotton Weary wasn't responsible. So, yeah, that was pretty cool. And then number one, I mean, you've got to guess at this point. It definitely it's definitely Scream 1. It was always going to be Scream 1 that was going to be number one. Scream is one of those films. It's just a certified classic. If I was to recommend any films horror related to people that haven't really watched horror before, you know, you've got Halloween, you've got Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. The acting in this film was really well done, and I like that the film was self-aware. Like, you're watching this film for the first time and you're thinking to yourself, like, this is kind of taking the piss out of some other films here. But that was the end goal of this film. It was supposed to be self-aware, supposed to be very meta. All these references to other horror films as well. When you've got Casey Becker on the phone talking to Ghostface about these horror films, you've got the conversation with like Randy about other horror films. Randy being that person that knows how to survive a horror film because he's watched that many, and a lot of the situations that take place, you know, can mirror what happens in horror films. The opening sequence, though, with Casey, definitely one of the most memorable opening sequences to a horror film, probably since Halloween, because it's quite scary when you kind of realize that this could literally happen to anybody. You could literally have somebody random call your phone, and, you know, you end up being a target. You have this chase go on through her house, and then she ends up escaping the house, sees her parents driving, and she tries to reach them but ultimately can't, and then she ends up getting brutally killed by Ghostface. And the scene where her mum looks and starts screaming, and it zooms into Casey being hung with her intestines hanging out. Quite a haunting reveal for a first kill. I did like the whole mystery aspect of it as well, because when you do it for the first time, it's something that's done really well. I feel like where other Scream films haven't really lived up to it is because the writing in those films wasn't as good as the writing in this film. You really didn't know who was going to be the Ghostface at the end, and especially when you get the twist at the end that there were actually two Ghostfaces. Like the whole mystery behind it, I feel like was done really well. You have Sydney that doesn't trust Billy, her own boyfriend, because he was acting suspicious, even though Billy had been sort of like exonerated after being arrested the first time. I feel like the payoff at the end, though, was well earned. Being that Sydney found out things about her mother, she eventually was able to prevail over Billy and Stu. The chemistry as well between Dewey and Gale, I felt, was really natural, and it was like really good as well. Now, I think that there was a rumor that at one point it was going to be Dewey that was the killer in this film, but then they ended up changing it because test reactions weren't so positive towards it. I think there was another rumor that Dewey was going to actually die in this film as well, but again, test audiences didn't react well to it, which is why we got Dewey for a few more films. But overall, I mean, Scream 1 it's certified classic. I don't think there could ever be another Scream film that's going to hit the heights that one did, because the unfortunate reality is not only do you have to make a good film, but you have to also do a reveal that is going to knock it out of the park, which I don't think any film really has done since then. The reveal in part 2 is not going to be, the reveal in part 2 wasn't as good as part 1, and I don't feel like part 2 overall was as good as part 1. You have the reveal in part 4, but then the story for part 4 wasn't as good as some of the other ones in the franchise. You had a really good story in part 6, but then the reveal of it just kind of deflated the whole thing. Yeah, it's just one of those things. I feel like Scream 1 essentially was just lightning in a bottle for this franchise. Now, that's not to knock on any of the other Scream films, because I do like the other Scream films. I will watch all the Scream films again, but there's just something about that first film. Obviously, I've spoken a lot of shit as well about Scream 7, but again, like, this is just coming from somebody that's passionate about the franchise, who wants this franchise to succeed. Even though I didn't like Scream 7, I still buy Ghostface related merch. I mean, I even have me a Ghostface mask, which definitely shows how much of a fan that I am of this franchise. I've got Funkos, I've got t-shirts and whatnot. So even when the franchise hits its lows, I'm still going to support this franchise, because I do want this franchise to succeed. I want them to be releasing good films. Hopefully Scream 8 will be a better film than Scream 7. Hopefully they can do something that's going to satisfy fans, not piss off a large portion of the fan base. Maybe let's leave the AI stuff behind and just think about something more grounded in reality. And hopefully they eventually bring Stu back, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's my Scream franchise ranking overall. If you guys rank it any differently, let me know. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.